Two, and
Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-host, Keith Bogan,
good morning or afternoon.
Doug Hamanike,
Good afternoon, all.
and Chad Holloway.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be talking about when we first started the show, shortly after the whole thing that happened in Minneapolis with the death of George Floyd went down, and we spent, I think, 2 weeks pretty much covering as many of the bases as we could about the death and race in this, some things about race in this country. Earlier this week, the verdict came down on the police officer who murdered George Floyd. He was found guilty on all 3 charges, 2 murder charges and manslaughter. So we are going to be discussing elements of that without the verdicts are in, but there is no sentencing yet. That will not happen for another few weeks on the Chauvin case. But there's been some other developments that have happened in recent weeks. We'll get into that in just a little bit. So who wants to kick us off here?
Well, I, for one, I don't think we're out of the woods, if you will. I mean, when I talk about being in the woods, I talk about
I think just
if the verdict had been different, there would have been bedlam in this country the way that would have put to shame, would have made last May look like nothing. But I'm still very concerned that there could be adverse reaction come sentencing time, depending on what happens there. And quite frankly, not to put too fine a spin on it, I think that anything short of the maximum sentence will result in a very, very dangerous times across the country.
Well, let's start with that for 1 second. The maximum sentence of all 3 charges combined is somewhere along the lines of 70 years. A first-time offender and police officer who in his mind was doing his job, they're not going to give him 73 years. It's not going to happen. It's just not feasible. That's not even what they're looking for. It's not even what prosecution's going after. So,
well, as you and I have discussed offline, we're getting different sources on that, obviously, because the maximum I'm hearing is 40, and I think
there's different maximums for each charge. There's 25 years for the 3rd degree, 40 years for the 2nd degree, and then manslaughter carries another 8.
And then there's the whole concept of concurrent versus consecutive, and they never do consecutive. They only do concurrent, which means that you're only going to have the charges from the biggest one stick. Everything else will be irrelevant because it'll be done at the same time.
Nope. That's not how it works in Minnesota. In Minnesota, he's looking probably at about 29 years. So looking at 12 and a half years for each murder charge and 4 for the manslaughter is what they're recommending in Minnesota. By their laws are different on things like that. So they're looking at 29 years or something like that, I believe.
And based on what the national media is reporting, which is not matching what you're saying, there will be hysteria in the streets if that's what happens. And I'm telling you, anything less than 40 years and there will be pandemonium.
I doubt that, but okay.
Did I lose you, Jason?
No,
But
No.
I think that's a good point because, Keith says it'll be pandemonium if it's less than a maximum. Jason says no. And, I guess my question to you guys is, what do you think the community is going to accept? I mean, like it seems like there's a range of possibilities there. And what at what level will justice be served? And I know we kind of heard he says maximum only. Jason says something less. I don't know where that is, and I'm not probably the appropriate person to ask. But what are your thoughts on that? How much is enough?
I would definitely say, look, we all get along really well, but I think it's pretty clear that Jason and I are more on the liberal side of things, and I'm probably the most quote unquote liberal person in the room. I like to call it progressive, but whatever you want to call it. And I am a right-wing fascist compared to my kids. And when I talk to my kids, I know that the greater majority of the population out there is thinking maximum or nothing, because of the anger that still festers about this. And it's not just about George Floyd, it's about all of the other people that have been victimized in this way, including the prominent names in recent times, and even a couple that have happened in the last few weeks. I mean, it keeps happening all the time. There are different situations, and unfortunately, we don't have the spotlight camera on. So thank goodness somebody took a video for 9 minutes and whatever seconds it was, because it's the only reason this is happening. But even the one that happened, the Dante, I can't remember the person's last name, in Columbus, Ohio. I don't think it's going to get the coverage because there was no actual video. There's body cam, but it's sketchy and all that. There's nobody sitting there actually recording the whole thing objectively. And that's the other thing I'm very worried about. And I think that my kids and their generation in general are very worried about, is the concept that no matter what has happened in the George Floyd situation, to shine a light on inappropriate police activity, that it will continue to happen, because 99% of the time there won't be somebody recording it so they can get away with whatever they want, and the blue line will continue to hold strong. That's the impression I get from the younger generation and from people who have a strongly vested interest in this.
Yeah. Even the way Keith just set up his response, which was excellently explained, is I have a more fundamentalist black and white take on things, and that's just my lifestyle, as well as Keith was explaining his liberal lifestyle, and my kids also gain from what they, my experiences in the way that I treat nearly everything in my life. And we did get into a conversation of justice and the outlying issues with, like we were saying, the media, and how people will perceive this if it goes either way. And like we were saying, justice for Floyd versus like what justice is to everybody in the media versus justice to the man on the street. And my son pretty much came to it as well as a very black and white, well, there's laws and there's rules, and this is what you get. And, you were found guilty, and that's how it should be. And then he couldn't understand exactly the concept of, well, he might get more, he might get less, and then what he keeps hearing about, from different news media outlets and whatever I watch and stuff, how it might lead to, like we were just saying, a riot and all. And well, why? And just going through that from different standpoints is a difficult thing and a difficult subject to have with your 15-year-old. Not difficult in a way that I can't just come up with something and tell it to them, but the more questions that it leads to, which went really in depth into race and racism and all, which I'll probably like lead into later on in this, but that was like more or less my 2 cents on how it actually affected my family.
It's interesting. Something Jason said a little while ago really resonates. When you were talking about the sentences and the number of years, and then you said the expression that finally hit home for me, first time offender. And I think that's the difference between some people's viewpoints and others. I think people who are very passionate about this, very rabid about this, don't look at this as a first time offense because they're not looking at it as Derek Chauvin. They're looking at it as the police community as a whole, when in fact, the individual who was convicted of the crimes, for him, apparently, it was a first time offense. But society doesn't care. Society wants blood because to people who are angry about police behavior toward the Black community, they look at it as a million times offense. So this whole first time offense argument, it's funny you said it that way, Jason, because it suddenly occurs to me that I think that there's a lot of people out there who don't care about that, because this is, just happened for centuries and not just as, they don't care that he's only done this once. No. Sort of a little epiphany there for me.
When I think it might be his first time offense, but I know he's had a number. I want to say the number I remember, and correct me if anybody knows, but I want to say it was like 17 complaints against him previously for things he'd done as an officer. But when I look at when I watch that tape, that recording, I think that given his job and the number of guys on top of him, I get to sometimes there are guys that aren't going to submit and that the force needs to be used, but they had him subdued, they had him under control, and we can sit and watch the life go out of him, literally. And it seems to me that in addition to bystanders saying, and again, bystanders are going to say what they're going to say, but in this instance, they were saying the truth, right? He should have been able to feel a difference in what was going on below him to know, hey, something's up. Let's roll this guy over. Let's do this. He's been here long enough. Let's put him in the car. So, it's a first time thing, but it seems like, I don't know. It just seems like there's something purposeful in that. I mean, he should have known what was going on when he
it's easy to
doing this guy and when he had him subdued with other officers.
I think it's easy to paint a picture of second degree murder because that is the definition of I did it intentionally, even though I didn't plan to do it, because first degree murder is premeditated.
Right.
I don't quite understand the manslaughter. I don't understand even the fact that he has 3 different murder charges because he only killed one person. I'm not trying to defend
Two
the guy
different.
by any means, but
2 different murder charges and manslaughter.
I know, but isn't manslaughter murder? I'm sorry, you can only kill
No,
someone once.
No, it is, well, it is, but it's a different, there's multiple different charges of it, but and then there's aggravated manslaughter. There's a ton of layers to this.
I was just going to say, taking off of like what Keith was saying, that this is beyond Chauvin, which I just was like mentioning earlier, is that can there really then be a fair trial of the police anymore? Because, we were just saying, the police make about 8 million interactions with people in a year. And of course, there's going to be things like this that happen. And, infallibly. And how much the media and the government, state, and just people's ire about these things is that is there such thing as, you know, justice for the person being taken into account versus, of the pressure of what, you know, the media portrays, and you know, and how everything that, even if sometimes things are taken in the wrong light, they jump to conclusions that we've seen happening more and more often, uh, and making people outraged, even when something doesn't go on. It's a real problem, as well, growing with these things. So I don't know. We find ourselves in a very confused world. Well, United States at least.
Definitely it's confusing. Definitely is. But
but I think that's part of what leads to the danger of people protesting in the wrong way, because there's so much confusion, because the legal system is so confusing to understand in the first place. Like, I'm a pretty educated guy, and I'm looking here and saying, you charge the guy with murder 3 times. What does that mean? Whether or not that sounds stupid or not, if I'm thinking it, imagine what most of this country is thinking. And then there's the whole confusion over the fact, not confusion, but the blurring of the lines between, are they really trying this one officer, or is this one officer on trial for all of the sins of his predecessors? Listen, I don't think 40 years is enough. I also don't want to, my personal belief, I don't want the country to be paying for his incarceration. I'd be happy with a black needle because the guy's scum. That's just me. But we can't rely on the media to give us the accurate information, because every source is different. So there is a massive amount of misconception about what's going on here, and this is what leads to all the massive protests that have happened in the past and may happen again. I'm telling you, if he gets 29 years, there's going to be hell to pay across this country. There's a huge perception that 40 is the number that he is allowed to get, and if he doesn't get that, it's going to be ugly. And people younger and with the more vested interest, if you will, if there is such a thing, are even more passionate about that. Jason, you look like you just swallowed an enema. Are you okay over there?
Yeah.
Just checking.
Also leads back into like what Jason was saying, is also people understanding the law and the way it's portrayed in the media, because consecutive versus, you were saying, concurrent, that's a huge difference. And if people understood the difference, first of all, that's a big understanding. Second of all, is actually knowing what the law is, which I'm glad Jason brought that to light.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's confusing along those lines is not only like in the sentencing, but in the charging. Keith, to your point about, is it manslaughter? There's 2 different charges, 2 different murder charges that he's on. And I've got a friend who's an attorney, and he says, I think we've talked about this offline, and he said that many times in these highly emotional, highly publicized situations, they overcharge the person to kind of put people at bay a little bit. But he says, but it's a charge that can't be proven in court. It's something that exceeds what can be proven in court. So they overcharge the guy, which is just a kind of a short-term solution to keep the people at bay. And then when it comes time for for the person on trial to be adjudicated, that they're found not guilty on that highest charge, which upsets people.
Well, they actually dismissed the middle charge in this case, and then it was reinstated in the trial about 5 or 6 weeks ago, I think, or something like that. A couple of weeks ago, they reinstated that 3rd-degree murder charge, and that was kind of when I was like, yeah, okay, this guy's really, they're probably going to. I'm a little bit surprised that they convicted him on all 3 charges. I figured that they would get him on 1 or 2, and I didn't I didn't fully expect that they'd be able to get all three of them. Because I thought that they would just, but obviously the jury was trying to basically, if he was convicted on one charge, an appeal is obviously it could have come up and it could have gone anyway, appeals can go anyway. But when they convicted him on all three, your chance of a successful appeal at that point is pretty much shot in the foot.
But they're going to appeal anyway. And by the way, there's this whole topic of the judge saying that the comments made by Representative Maxine Waters gave the defense all the grounds they needed for appeal. I'm sorry, wasn't the jury sequestered? Why would they have even known about her comments? And by the way, they weren't even that inflammatory as some of the media made out. But it doesn't matter. They're going to appeal. That's one of the things that's wrong with the American jurisprudence system is that even if they have no grounds to appeal, they're going to appeal, and it's going to drag out for another couple of years. He may be in solitary confinement the whole time, but he's going to be in jail. But he won't be in jail for the charges. He'll be in jail awaiting the sentencing, and this will go on for 2, 3, 4 years. And there won't even be any grounds for it, but it's still going to happen. We don't have an effective system that, swift justice is guaranteed in this country. That's a bunch of crock. It's not true. It just takes forever.
I agree with that 100%. It's almost like we need to look at the justice system because nothing is very fast. And, we have these quote unquote laws, but all these laws are interpreted. So really it's a subjective system that people are put into. Some judges can say, oh yeah, it's this guy's going to get 2 years for these charges. And then another judge might say they're going to get 10 years. And then you can have a person with the same profile come up and 2 years later and have it be reversed. Have the person get a longer sentence instead of a shorter sentence. And it's very, very subjective, I think, and time consuming, whether it's in civil court or it's in criminal court. It's really something that needs to be looked at, in addition to what's going on in the police forces. And I think Keith made the comment earlier about, what does this really mean kind of going forward, for the future? Because obviously we've seen stuff continuing to happen in the past. We've got a history of this going on. But what does it mean for the future? Will this be a pivotal moment? I myself, I don't think so. I don't think that all police are bad. I think that the great majority of police are good, and that, there's some bad situations people get into, and there are some bad police that are out there. But that is a very small percentage, I believe, of those forces. But how do we get it? How do we get at remedying what's going on in these? If you remember the LA riots after that, the Rodney King, did anything really change after that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're still sitting here, and our predecessors could have been talking about this, 25 years ago. The same thing about, Rodney King, he gets out. Is this a turning point? Is this, what does this mean for the protest? The same thing. So and what does it take? What will it take to really impact this in a meaningful way? I don't know.
No, to answer the question, I know it may have been rhetorical, but no, nothing changed after the Rodney King verdict, and if anything, it got worse. I think police relations with amongst minorities especially got worse, because there was this level of invincibility amongst the police at that point, I believe, that to an extent I believe there are some police that still believe they are invincible. And clearly, obviously, we're learning more and more they're not. But with Chauvin, there's a chance, albeit a slim one, that this is the signaling for change. But as we've clearly seen, it isn't. There have been incidents since. There was the incidents that happened in Brooklyn Park earlier this month, where a little bit different incident, obviously, more a mistake-driven incident, but with the police officer who was trying to subdue a suspect with a taser, pulled out her gun, grabbed the wrong side, pulled out her gun, and killed the suspect. Killed the perpetrator, whatever it is, or whatever the issue was, for whatever offense it was, and I believe it was a minor offense. But she's been fired, and obviously right now there may not be much of a sign of change, but hopefully there's still, some hope that change is possible here. That maybe the Chauvin case will take things in the right direction. I don't believe it will. No, I don't believe it will at all. It may get better, but it's not going to make a significant change, I don't believe.
Is it unreasonable to think that the only reason the Chauvin case carried such national weight was not because it was caught on video, although that is certainly a major factor that people, you're staring right at it, you have an unfiltered look at a horrible murder. But because it was right in the middle of a pandemic where so many people were not working and they had the ability to not just protest for 2 or 3 days, they had nothing to do for months. So the protests actually carried on for months when they never would have in any other case, because people go to work. They don't usually have the ability to stick around very long. I think that was one of the motivating factors to this becoming such a passionate thing, because it lasted for such a very long period of time in a once in a lifetime, hopefully once in a lifetime pandemic situation where people were available to do that. The video was different, yes, but the ability to continue to be angry about it was also different. People don't have long-term memories.
The video was not different. This is not something new. There has been a lot of these that have had videos attached to them.
Have they ever been this clear though? I mean, this blatantly every single second of the murder clear? I don't know. I mean, some of them have been pretty convincing. This one seems to be the most clear evidence of anybody doing what they did. But even if, so maybe you're making my point for me, that there have been other videos and it's been very obvious in other times, but people, they come out and they protest for 2 or 3 days and things get damaged and things get ugly for a couple of days, and then they got to go back to work. In this case, during a pandemic, it was an unusual situation, a once in a lifetime situation where people didn't have to go to work. So they could continue on, and they did for months. And will we ever be in a situation like that where it could actually happen again? And I don't know if that'll ever happen, at least in our lifetimes. Let's hope the next pandemic isn't next year. That's what I'm kind of getting,
I think you're exactly right, Keith. I never thought of it from that perspective, but I think, when you look at the pandemic, people having extra time and having time away from work to actually participate in these things, you're absolutely right. I mean, why did it elevate in importance? Because people could maintain and sustain that level and that level of protesting that went on with that. And to your point about the video, I do think that the video played a very important role in this, because, as Jason said, there's been videos in the past, but even, another disturbing one that I can think of is, I believe his name was Philandro Castile. And he had a licensed weapon. And he told the policeman, and the policeman shot him. I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was a situation gone very bad again. And but that was kind of from a phone. It was kind of the ground, kind of halfway. But this, you could see kind of all the players you could see all the players. Everything was in frame. And like I said, I think in an earlier conversation, you could see the life leave the man.
Mhm. The Brooklyn Park situation is another example of where there's video. The police officer has body cam, but it's shaky, it's bouncing around, and you never actually see the shot being fired, and you certainly aren't seeing the weapon being used because it's on the officer, it's not in the camera's view. So it's
Well,
all and bouncing cameras and all that stuff. It's a great idea, and I think that one of the things that the Chauvin murder will do is really push forward the idea of all police wearing body cams. So we should
But
have many more videos of things, but they're always going to be jumpy, shaky from the wrong perspective. They're not going to be the whole view like we're doing a movie. It's going to be from the perspective of what the police officer sees without knowing what the police officer does with their hands.
well, with the one with
but,
the
but
case,
I did see a video where she had pulled the gun, and the gun was like directly in front of the camera because it was from her vest. And I was looking directly at the back of the gun, and she says, "I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you." But I could see that wasn't a taser she had in her hand. But I think this case differs in another way, and that's that they had run his, even if they pulled him over for some sort of BS item, he had a warrant for his arrest for not showing up for some sort of illegal possession of a firearm, something along those lines. And then he runs, he flees, which is very different, I think, than having somebody pressed to the ground. And
Didn't he
That's
run
it.
after he was shot?
they were handcuffing him outside of the car, and he broke free from the officer, went to the car, and that's when both the officers went to pull him out, and she pulled the wrong gun. Instead of the taser, she pulled the handgun. And I think that guy, if that guy would have ran, I know I'm locked up here.
No, you're good. You're good. You're back.
Sorry about that. But good. But if he would not have run, I think that guy would be here to talk about the arrest. And certainly, did he deserve to die? Absolutely not. But it was definitely an accident. But like I've said before, I think in some of these things that are high stress, high emotion, it's very easy for us to sit back here in our armchairs and to talk about, well, how that was just a mistake and stupid and blah blah blah. But until we're in that position and have to do something, I always think about, I worked in a lot of hospitals, and I think about going down to the ER and people coming in. It's like, well, what's wrong with this guy? Well, we got to figure it out. And the doctor taking action. They take action based on what they think. And is that action always correct? Probably not. But they're under a high stress, high emotion situation, like the police. So I think those, both tragic situations. But I think the second one has some variances from the first, for sure.
oh, sure. Oh, absolutely, it does. As I had said, it's a completely different situation. There's a lot of elements to it that are different from what happened in Brooklyn Park and what happened with George Floyd. But it still doesn't. Two wrongs don't make a right. There still isn't a right in this aspect. Even mistake, or while she was trying to do her job, it doesn't make her right at all. It doesn't make right what she did. Mistake or not. There's and I mean, it goes back to, there's been so many over the last few years. It seems like there's almost one every couple of days now, to that point or something like that you're seeing some of these incidents happen. There was an incident, I believe in Virginia, where there was or West Virginia, where there was an African-American military man who the police have been brought into question for their actions against him.
Yep.
And that was just, they maced him while trying to subdue him and arrest him. But some of the comments that are made by the police officer are controversial. There's been some stuff about a felony, which what he had done was relatively minor, like very minor, where he could have possibly even gotten off with a warning. And this cop is exaggerating what's going on, escalating the situation. But these things have just seem to be continuing. And in some cases, as I said, I think in some aspects things are getting worse, not better. So, okay, now the question can be brought up. Now, what do we do? What can we do, or what can be done as citizens, as parents, as anything, to try to avoid or help these situations? What does the police force need to do in these situations? Do they need better training in these types of situations? Do they need better training in dealing with high pressure situations like this? Knowing that things can escalate very quickly, and their responses to it.
Wait, did you just open the door on the defunding conversation?
No,
Did you just-
absolutely not.
Because that's exactly what you just started talking about.
Absolutely not. No,
Because if we were going to interpret the movement to defund properly, that's exactly what you were just talking about. Jason looks like he wants to crawl into a hole right now. I've got him pinned to the wall. This is good.
no, you don't. But there obviously needs to be better relations between the public and the police. And I don't think it's just racially involved at all. But I think it's something that is everyone's problem, not just the police. Because you have the way individuals in the public react to situations as well. Because sometimes, let's just say it, an asshole is an asshole, be it a member of the public or a police officer. There's good and bad on each side of the law. That's just the way it is. If you're going to sit here and tell me there's not, you're wrong. I mean, the situation, like I said, there's no end in sight to this. I mean, nothing's going to change. I'm not going to say nothing's going to change, but we're a long way from change. And we've been, this has been going on. These things have been going on, like I said, and increasing numbers of these incidents happening.
I'm going to follow this conversation anyway. There is an end in sight if people will stop asking the police to do the things that they're not trained to do and they shouldn't be doing. We give them the resources to focus on the job that they should be doing and bring in other resources to do the jobs they shouldn't be. The social workers, the proper criminal justice structure. Then the police can be much more effective and stop being put in positions that that didn't come out right, that result in these types of things partly because of their own biases, but partly because of other pressures as well. We have asked the police in this country to do everything, like everything. You know, the most famous image you would have is, you know, retrieving cats out of trees. I mean, like what? But to put them in positions to try to talk to people who are strung out on drugs or are dealing with prostitution should not be police matters. And I'm sorry, Jason, it's not defunding, it's properly funding the right sources to support them in the best ways. Defunding has never meant that word. It does to a few crazy fews, but for the most part, no. I think that we are on the cusp of doing the right thing in terms of, the cusp could be the next 10 years of starting to reorient the resources to provide the type of support that the police could use to be more effective and less biased. I have silenced the group.
Well, I mean, if you really want, I mean, some police captains there. The guy was on the. I'm gonna probably botch like where he's from. I think he might have been from the Park murder, and he's the police chief there, and he agrees, and he said that right up front, and he goes, but sometimes, you know, as well, there isn't time or whatever to have unless these people are driving along with the cops and, you know, different situations. He went through a couple of them and says, you know, where it could be useful, where it can. And I mean, you know, that has to be all worked out and all. But it was just interesting that, you know, this has come to such a level that very quickly, and it seems that anybody saw this week's Law and Order episode, it tackles this like right away with the role playing of the police and better understanding.
Hey, Doug, we're getting a lot of wind noise on your end. It's hard to hear you.
We've lost about half of what you said.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And over to Chad.
And hopefully I'll stay on here long enough to get a point in. You know, I heard Doug saying something about riding along with the police. So had a friend who was a police officer and know somebody who went with her on one of her nightly shifts. And so what happens sometimes when people overdose is they drag the people, the drugs, into the yard or like between the yard and the sidewalk, or between the street and the sidewalk, where it's kind of like more public property, where it's not necessarily their property. So they have no reason to come in and search the house, even though they're coming to save the person, right? So you get some of this stuff going on. And then another thing is that, you know, this cop that I know, she saved several people's lives. And she said there was this one time in particular when she saved the person's life and they were upset. She said this person was not breathing, did not have vital signs, and they had to give him an injection of something, I think the Narcan. And she said, and this person woke up and said, "You ruined my buzz." I mean, it's you know, that those are some of the things that they deal with. And you know, Keith, I know you were talking about like having the police do certain things versus other things. No, but you know, I think it's hard to know if these situations are going to get out of hand or not. You know, I had a friend whose brother-in-law actually had some psychiatric disorders, and this is probably within the last 2 to 3 years, and engaged in suicide by police. But you know, it's one thing to go and talk to somebody who's having a psychotic crisis, psychotic break, but it's another thing if that person has a gun. And you know, I mean, and I think if you talk to most social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, they're going to say, well, you know, I can certainly deal with these people, but I need security. I need police with me. Maybe that's part of it, is that they go with the police, because I've seen enough psychiatric cases come into the hospital even where the clinicians are not there by themselves. They have, you know, 2, 3, 4 people, security types with them in case something does happen. And this person, they know that they know that they're not armed. They know that they don't have access to any things because they're in the hospital. They've already been checked for these items. So, you know, it's a difficult it's a difficult thing to really impact, you know. Um, and the police have to wear many, many hats, I think, and to the points of the recent the recent videos that we've seen, you know, I don't know that a social worker or psychologist could have handled, you know, the George Floyd case anyway. I mean, that was a, you know, counterfeit bill. It seems like it was a criminal case, and you know, I mean, things deteriorated. Certainly wasn't necessarily a. I don't know if that's a felony or not, but I'm guessing currency probably. I don't know. Um, but then the other one with the lady pursuing, you know, pulling her gun instead of the taser. You know, I mean, how would that have been handled differently? I mean, if it was another cop there, because the guy was running, it wasn't a hey, let's talk this guy into coming in. So I don't know. I think it's difficult. When I first heard this, and I certainly think that there are times when it's inappropriate to call the police, or when somebody else can maybe handle the job a little different. But you know, people are unpredictable. And I remember one time I talked to a friend who's a firefighter, and you know, I said, you know, these guys just run in. I go, they're not stopping, they're not thinking. I said, they just run in. You know, they got their axe, they've got their fire extinguishers, and this was in the hospital situation again. And they just go, and they're like, I'm going to get that fire. I said, I'm sorry, I'm a fireman. And I said, but the police, I said, they don't. I said that they come in and they ask questions about it, and they're very thorough in their notes, and they note taking. And I said, and the person that has committed the crime, or that is in question, is fleeing the hospital, is going to get away. There's going to be issues with that. And he said to me, he says, well, it's pretty simple. He says, as firemen, we know what the fire is going to do because it's a matter of science. But he says, people are unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do. That's why that's why the police take their time and we don't, because we know what's going on with that fire and what it will do based on how it looks and our training. People are unpredictable.
I think that in the case of the Chauvin case, and in the case of the Brooklyn, the inappropriate taser turned gun situation, Brooklyn Heights, I don't think either one of them would have been changed by properly funding the right set of resources for the police. But those are just two examples. In general, the whole concept is, if you have a situation where you know you have somebody who may be heavily affected by drug use, the police are going to come out to secure the site, and they're going to bring with them somebody who is trained in the art of dealing with people who are strung out and helping them to properly behave into a situation where they can then go get help. You know, if I'll never forget the day that there was a possum in my house, and my then wife, I found her screaming on top of the island that's right behind me. I mean, she's literally standing on top of it. There's a rat in my house. There's a rat in my house, and she calls the cops. But it's animal control, and that's exactly. The cops came, they secured the premises, and they brought the animal control person. The animal control person came in and took our furry friend to another place. Much to my disappointment, because he was kind of cute, but that's besides the point. And you know, the same thing this is what the whole battle is for. Give the police the resources to bring with them the certain specialists in different areas. If someone is known to be mentally unstable, police aren't trained in how to deal with that. The police have guns and handcuffs and nightsticks. They don't really have a whole lot of training beyond that. You know, you have mental health specialists who really understand that sort of thing and should be the front line of that. When there's a hostage situation, does a police officer run the negotiations? No. You get a hostage negotiator specialist to come in and do that. Mm-hmm. Why is it so different for all the other things that police are charged to do? It's too much for them. It's not fair to the police. I'm not saying that that's why Derek Chauvin did what he did. He's a scumbag. Like I said, I'd give him the black needle. But there are many police who are put in very bad situations where they're asked to do too many things that they're not prepared to. And a lot of what happens could be avoided if we gave them the support that we get. I don't want to defund anybody. And 99% of the people out there don't want to defund anybody. It's a stupid goddamn word. Excuse me.
And I think, Keith, to your point, a way that I could see this working too is, to your point, your wife called the police. Well, she didn't know who else to call, right? It's education of the community that, hey, there is this other option out there. And if you pull up the internet, you can find animal control and call animal control. So some of that might be just even engaging those resources on their own. But I think usually when people call the police, there's some sort of real urgent situation. But to your
Well,
point,
in her defense, she couldn't have reached the computer from where she was standing at that point. So, it'd have been tough.
But also just, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was going to say, but I think that's another situation as well, or that's a situation to your point is like it's not only having those additional types of things available, because some of them probably are available. It's having people access them appropriately, but it's so easy whenever it's an emergency to call 911, and then they come and they assess the situation. They respond first. They respond quickly, and kind of assess the situation. And to your point, secure the location, and then call in the people appropriate. But if we could make that call first, maybe that would help. Doug?
Oh no, I just to just to change to this point, like you guys are now talking about after I broke up before, sorry. Yeah, maybe dispatch could do things like that. But like we were saying in like the case of Knife Fight that had happened, that also is like one of those things where if you look at the background language and the things going on, and I've heard some senators like mention this as well, is that where it might be tough to some people to take is that why were the police called? And I mean, it was a serious matter. I don't disagree or say anything about that, but there's a bunch of adults there that should have been able to diffuse this on their own. And then yeah, I mean that was just like one of those sad cases where it just went terribly wrong, but it's also, yeah, parenting and parents should have been able to take care of that before it got to the point of this. And the further we look into the case, the just more wrong it looks like for the family members. I mean, but earlier Jason was talking about like, what are we going to do next? And it's a real hard thing to unpack. I mean, some of it we could see already playing out in the media, and it was just interesting that this week, right away, Law and Order jumped right on this, idea, and they had a very emotional episode, which leads into mental health and the pandemic, and it goes right into gun violence and police and how the police handle things, and some of the techniques that we're talking about using here are all melded right into this one episode. So, I mean, they were right on it, and you could see how the media is playing into that. But like we were saying with the Chauvin thing, there's a lot of things being all pulled into this case, which is, jury by media and the public town crier, where, it's hard to tackle everything all at the same time, because we're talking about many different things here. We're talking about police excessive force, brutality, racism, like all these things that not necessarily even fold into this case, but like we were saying, it's all being hung up under the police and change. And I don't think we could accomplish it all at the same time, but but the people are crying for it all now, and they're almost making it like it has to happen now, which, the wheels of justice sometimes move slowly and people don't want to hear that. And I don't. That's the only way I could see it going forward is, breaking these things down and moving, slowly, like with the government and local, state by state, and a difference with community factors and how people treat things in their own community and what they work on, from those angles, which is very different from the government version, the state version, or even what's going on in your own town. Because like I've said already before, my town doesn't have police. I know we're a small community of only about 4,000, but I mean, we don't have a police force. So it's very different for us, from a town point of view.
No, it's gonna be a,
as well. If you look at, for example, culture, and the African American culture is different as well, I believe. One of the things I've thought is, well, what if we hired more Black police officers? But sometimes that doesn't play because it's like they're trying to be white, or they're an Uncle Tom, or there's all kinds of things. It's very difficult, I think, for an African American Black person to take on a role of authority over other Black people, other African Americans, and to be successful at it. But I don't know how. I mean that's another thing. I think there's just some cultural differences as well.
no, it's gonna be it's not gonna be a quick process. It's gonna take time. The only thing is, this is something they should have been working on already. They should have started working on these changes. They should have started working on these changes probably 30 years ago. But it's changes, for some reason, whether they don't want to or whatever it is, they're not being made. They need to start, but and you can't expect everything to be immediate. It's going to be progressive, but any kind of progress here would be good. Anybody have anything they want to add before we?
Yeah, I guess just to your point about the actions that have been taken in the past. I think people have been taking actions that they do think are going to be effective in terms of reforming and educating the police and training the police, and it's easy for us, I think, to sit here on our call and say, well, they're wrong and they should have done more and they should have done this, they should have done that. But things at that time, I think that they looked very effective. And one of the things I studied as a graduate student was changing people's behavior. And it ain't easy. It's not easy to change people's behavior. So I don't know. I mean, and I wish that we had all the answers to be able to do this. But I mean, even if we sat here and thought about them and made some changes, I think that people look at our changes and be like, well, that wasn't far, that you guys didn't go far enough and you didn't pay enough attention to X, Y, and Z. And, it's very easy for people, I think, to criticize, but at the same time, I do think more needs to be done, but I know that things are being done. But how can these things be done more effectively?
Last thought for me is that we spent a lot of time in this podcast bemoaning the role of social media in our lives, and rightfully so. Quite frankly, it sucks. But with that said, I think that the opportunity to make change at a much more rapid pace now is in the hands of social media, because it exposes so much more than it did even 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we didn't have people standing there with their cell phone. Well, 15 years ago, we didn't have people standing there with their cell phones recording stuff like this. It's not in high quality. That sort of thing will happen much more frequently now. People will be emboldened to do it. And so, and all the social media channels to broadcast that sort of thing are now in full force. So the change will still not come as quickly as we would like it to, but I don't think it will take decades like it has previously, because those who perpetrate these evils can't hide anymore. They will be outed much more quickly.
I think for us, it's behavior and words do matter, and the definition of words. And, a lot of people have different opinions on what things mean and what their definitions are. And we could see today that a definition of a word could be one thing on one day, and then it could be changed in a matter of minutes. And the media, as Keith said, can work both ways. And I think it also can incite people and push people to different levels. I mean, and well, either for good reasons or bad reasons, just for ratings. And I don't think they always have the public's opinion or what in mind when they do promote a lot of this stuff. And we see more and more people calling them out, which is good. But I think it works both ways. But as like we were talking, what I was saying about definitions is that as we train our children and all and shape their views of what they understand and what things are and what things mean, it's important to use real language and for them to understand the language that you're using, because like I said, words do matter.
Pretty soon we're gonna have to start making a drinking game on the show here. The drinking game is gonna be when Doug in the show and how many times he's gonna mention the media and start to rip it apart.
Listen, I'm right behind him. It's okay.
But he has a point. I agree with Doug.
To an extent. We are in a time where the way forward is progress. And the way forward is to make changes that some people may not want to make. Some sacrifices are clearly going to need to be made. The way both the public and the police handle themselves need to be changed. The perceptions of the public by the police and the police by the public needs to change. These are changes, as I said, that should have been made a very long time ago. And changes that have been made, for sure, have room for improvement. Hopefully, we have started to we will start making the right kind of progress soon. From all of us here at Dads on Life, take care, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Great week.